Let's update you on the Ryan Adams situation because there's a lot that's been going on in the 3 or 4 days since we last really talked about it, including Marc Maron releasing an interview with Mandy Moore on his WTF podcast. I'll have some audio for you guys on that. We also hear from Jenny Lewis here and one of his frequent collaborators. I don't know where should we start with the Maron stuff? If you don't know, Marc Maron has a podcast called WTF Pod. It is phenomenally done. He is and I've been listening to him literally for like 8 years. I'm very into this kind of stuff. In case you haven't noticed the podcasting, I was a very ground level with Marc. He's grown. He's great. Can't encourage you enough. This audio is courtesy of the WTF podcast. In this first clip, we hear Mandy discussing meeting Ryan, that she was in Minneapolis, and she was doing a show in the same city, and they heard that Ryan Adams and the Cardinals were playing somewhere. She didn't know who he was. Her band was very excited. She was with her friend Chris Stills, son of Steven Stills, and they went to go see him. And they were like, well, you can meet him if you want after the show. So they usher them back into this area. And the band comes out, and Ryan's nowhere to be found. And they were like, well, Ryan felt like he had a bad show, so he's on the tour bus. And if you want to meet him, you can go on the tour bus to go ahead and meet him. So Chris and Mandy wind up hopping up on the tour bus to meet him. And this is exactly the moment that they met.
Chris and I are like, okay. So we hop on the bus, and Ryan's back there, and he's on his laptop, and he has these glasses on and crazy hair and like a flannel shirt. And he shows us some ridiculous movie he's made on his laptop called like Pizza Ninja or something that he made with his bandmates on his digital camera.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, I was just like, this guy is the most bizarre person, but his mind, I've never met anyone like him.
Yeah.
And as a 23-year-old impressionable young woman.
That's how old you were, 23.
I was really taken by him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just I had never met someone who had that lens on the world.
Uh-huh.
And
blew your mind.
Blew my mind.
And you were
just he was so unabashedly like himself, I guess.
Yeah.
And I left, and I remember turning to Chris, and I was like, I really like him.
And that was the moment that they met. Some background on this at the time, right around this time in Mandy's life, her parents' marriage had fallen apart. Her mom had fallen in love with somebody else. She found out prior to her mom being able to tell her. So there was sort of this, I guess, as what happens with divorced parents, there was a sort of void to fill amongst the child. And I think that sort of played into this relationship with her. And she also brings up this other interesting point, which I never really thought of, which was she had such early success in her life. She had become so successful so early on that when the relationship with Ryan sort of started to turn sour, it almost became this guilty thing of, well, I had my time, in the spotlight, being happy, getting all these things, being so fortunate, that this is sort of the other side of that, the yang to that yin, I thought that was really interesting. That sort of thought never had really occurred to me. Here's more with Marc Maron on the beginnings of their relationship and her sort of realizing, things weren't sort of as wonderful as she thought they were going to be in the beginning.
Yes and no. I mean, without getting too into the weeds, he is an incredibly prolific writer.
Yeah.
He's constantly writing music and poetry.
I think that's how he stays sane.
Yeah, I guess. I think that
I don't know him.
I think that's his.
If he is sane, Marc Maron said.
That's just where he operates.
Yeah,
that's
right.
where he feels comfortable. It's ingrained in the fiber of who he is. If he's not creating, he's not himself.
Right.
So it was intimidating, but also it became the norm.
Yeah.
So after a while, that kind of faded, and you're like, oh, this is just my husband, and he's writing another song. It's not that big of a deal.
And what were you doing?
I was living my life for him. Yeah.
Well, codependency action,
Yeah.
taking care of the.
Being the mother. Yeah.
Yeah, and that becomes.
It's an entirely unhealthy dynamic.
Well, yeah, because you lose yourself.
Oh, I had no sense of self. I was imperceptible. I was so small in my own world. It made me feel worthy.
Yeah.
It made me feel like I had value if I could be there for somebody else and serve their needs, you know? Because I think it, like, not to go down, again, a rabbit hole with, like, therapy, but I think it goes back to feeling undeserving of what I've had in my life, you know, as a young person and finding success. And
Right.
I think there was part of me that's like, okay, well, this part of my life is, I'm okay to not live for myself right now.
This
I've had
guy
enough
needs
of
me.
that. He needs me.
Yeah.
And I know how to do that. I know how, this person who's estranged from their family, like, I can show them what it's like to have a normal life and to celebrate birthdays and holidays and go on vacations. And
this is after your family is shattered.
after exactly. It's like, let's do this together. And I thought that that's how it was going to sort of unfold, but it didn't.
So that's again, Mandy Moore going on about, you know, what she thought was going to happen, and, you know, sort of this thing of, you know, I know this happens a lot of times to, you know, people who are not prone to abuse, but people who get abused in relationships oftentimes are prone to that. I can fix the other person. I could be there for the other person. I could mother the other person. I'm no, you know, therapist here, but that's you know, a fairly common thing. And a lot of the times, you know, it never quite works out to be that way. It was a great piece with Mark. I got another clip for you here as Mandy continues to explain sort of the dynamics of the relationship.
I think my codependency fed into his codependency and some other underlying issues that, like, it was just the perfect cacophony of madness.
Yeah.
And it really was, I was so not serving myself.
And what was the moment where you're like, get out, I gotta get out?
I felt like I was drowning.
No.
Yeah. It was so untenable and unsustainable.
Yeah.
And I was so lonely. I was so sad.
Because he was away all the time, or you were lonely with him?
I was lonely with him.
Oh, it's the worst.
The worst. There's nothing worse. So
because like part of you detaches and there's just this talking thing there.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's talking again. Yeah. And you're like, what am I doing? And you're thinking about being other places. And
I knew that this wasn't the rest of my life.
And
I knew that this was not the person I was supposed to be with. I was not the person I was meant to be.
Was there a lot of drama? Like yelling and screaming and stuff?
Yeah. And I am not a dramatic person. I'm not a fighter.
Did you become one?
I would try to fight back, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I hate confrontation. I shrink from it. I avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
I'm not good at it.
And you're living with it.
And I lived with it. And I'm just like, it's just not built in the fiber of who I am. I'm not good at it. I can't find my words.
Yeah. So were you like, I'm done?
Kind of.
Yeah.
If it were only that easy. But unfortunately it was not. It just was a lot of endless conversations.
Crying?
Conversations in a loop, crying.
Ugh.
Yeah, all of that.
Oh.
Yeah, for months and months and months and months and months, even after filing for divorce.
I got to give credit to Mark for doing a fantastic job to have her in studio and actually have her laughing, talking about one of the low points of her life. Like, that is just, again, credit of a good interviewer there, Marc Maron and the WTF podcast. For more info on Mark and the podcast, WTFpod.com has all that information. You do notice, and I did notice a couple of times during this interview where she does sort of grace what she's talking about here, but doesn't really get into the detail. There's a lot of holdback on her part, not faulting her for that. I'm just saying what we're hearing is surface, and it feels like there's a lot more to be told with this story. Two more clips from this interview of Mandy again explaining their relationship together and what it was like going through and how it impacted her career, and prevented her from going out and doing things.
And I didn't really have a choice. I knew that I couldn't be in that relationship. It wouldn't sustain itself if I was working as well. Because there would be glimmers of that, of me. I would do little jobs. It's not like I completely stopped working, but I would do things here or there, but it became abundantly clear while I was working. Things would completely fall apart at home.
Really?
It showed me.
In what way?
It just... You know, if you're not there to take care of someone, essentially.
Who needs that?
Who needs it?
Then
emotionally, literally.
So you get estranged inside a week.
Yeah.
Like you come home and you're like, what's,
Or just like endless, I mean, I hate to be so personal, but it's like endless, like, I couldn't do my job because there was just a constant stream of trying to pay attention to this person who needed me.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't let me do anything else because...
That's rough.
Yeah, it was...
So you were kind of stifled.
Completely.
Hostage situation.
So it was like, I knew that I wouldn't... I even had my best friend at the time was like, you will not be able to work or find any semblance of success while you're in this marriage. Oof. And I remember sort of like poo-pooing her at the time, but also kind of quietly agreeing.
Yeah.
And then they talked about her career quickly, the fact that she never really produced anything in the time that they were together.
You never made a record. You were on Ryan's record, but you guys never did a record together. You never did any of his songs or anything.
No. But I would sing on his records, yeah.
It's weird that he never wrote enough songs for you. Okay. So...
No comment.
You can see there, she's... No comment. Again, alluding to there's a lot more there that wasn't spoken about in this interview. And I don't know if she ever will or more time needs to pass or whatever the case is. She's, got to go through her own process. But I bring it up because clearly there's a lot more there on her end that she just wasn't talking about. And as we saw, and I believe they recorded this prior to the release of the New York Times article, but he just released it after the article. But clearly, I think she had maybe done the article or knew that the article was coming out. Don't quote me on any of this. I'm going on assumption here, just on some of the things he said prior to the start of the interview. Yeah, I mean, I think this sounds like there's more to be told there. Phoebe Bridgers, who was involved with this, put a statement out on Instagram. Captioning under the caption of a photograph with her fellow bandmates in her little supergroup. I didn't mean to say little like that, but her supergroup that she's got going on with Lucy Dacus, who have become amazing EHM sessions artist, and Courtney J. They put out a statement under a photograph of them, saying, quote, "It's been a weird week and I wanted to say a couple things. Thank you from my whole expletive heart to my friends, my bands, my mom. They all supported and validated me. They told me that what had happened was expletive up and wrong and that I was right to feel weird about it. I couldn't have done this without them. Ryan had a network too. Friends, bands, people he worked with, none of them held him accountable. They told him by what they said or by what they didn't that what he was doing was okay. They validated him. He couldn't have done this without them. Guys, if your friend is acting messed up, call them out. If they're actually your friend, they'll listen. That's the way this all gets better." Incredibly poignant from Phoebe Bridgers, to not only rest on the laurels of, I got this off my chest, I said it, this is what happened to me, which is incredibly hard to do. She's kind of almost going on the offensive here in the fact of like, you know what, he wasn't alone in this, that all these other people around him allowed this sort of behavior to happen, which is a difficult thing to do. We've all been in situations where somebody does something, you're like, Some of us do the right thing, some of us don't. It's almost like a fight or flight response in those sort of scenarios. Not an easy thing to do. This is not an easy area to be in. But her point is valid. She's right. She is right that there were clearly there were definitely people around him that allowed this sort of thing to happen. Interestingly enough, not that long after she put this statement out, Ginny Lewis responded on Twitter saying, quote, "I am deeply troubled by Ryan Adams' alleged behavior. Although he and I had a working professional relationship, I stand in solidarity with the women who have come forward. I mean, to me, that says that Jenny certainly didn't have sort of the interaction that Phoebe or Mandy had with him. But maybe she, maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't know. But good on her for at least coming out and saying, look, I stand with these women. Just because I worked with the guy in the past doesn't mean, that I'm on his side in any way, shape, or form. I did find the statement released by Ryan Adams' guitarist Todd Weisenbaker very interesting. Very interesting. He took to Instagram to say and I'll read the whole thing for you here. There were times, this was Ryan Adams' guitarist. There were times when I chose to believe his insane version of the truth because it was easier than believing that anyone is capable of being this much of a monster. It's sickening and embarrassing. I've recently learned that pretty much everything he's ever told me is a lie upon a lie upon a lie. There are excuses and denials for everything. Some time ago, I told him to get help, and he asked me to help him. I don't regret and will never regret trying to help someone in real need. I believe in forgiveness, redemption, and recovery, but my life has become a complete expletive storm of someone else's utter delusion. I didn't want to say anything because I'm actively afraid for the safety of my family, but I do realize that I have a responsibility to speak up. The women that spoke out are brave beyond words. Again, good on Phoebe for calling out the people around him, totally justified in doing so. But then you read this guy's statement and, there was some effort there. Sounds like he tried. Sounds like he himself was afraid. Sounds like he himself was, I hate to say victimized, but a victim to a degree of he was a victim to lies. Maybe not abuse. Maybe not, doesn't sound like what Mandy and Phoebe and all these other women went through, but he was lied to, according to him. It's never an easy thing when you're dealing with this sort of situation. Never easy. But obviously there's a fair amount of guilt, associated with what this guy Todd said. Definitely feels some remorse. Again, it's very easy for all of us to sit here and point and judge some of these people, but until you're in that situation, like I said, it's a fight or flight thing. You don't really know which way you're going to go. You hope you do the right thing. You hope that other people do the right thing. We all know that life isn't like that. This fallout will continue. You do sort of think about the victims, Phoebe, Mandy, and the way she talks about these things. You also think about some of the people who got caught in this collateral damage, other people that weren't victimized as much as the ladies were, but, Todd and other band members, Don Was just produced all his new stuff. He's pulled out. He's completely... Don was liking his Instagram posts. He went so far to separate himself that he unliked his social media posts, Ryan Adams' posts. That's how far away he's getting from this whole thing. Did he no-go? There's a lot. There's a lot to this. It's clearly not over. The FBI investigation is ongoing from what I understand. And we'll update you if anything else happens. But now it's these headlines come and go. But when you're into it and you kind of stay with the story and now you start to see some of the fallout of what these other people are going through in their lives, it's unfortunate. It's unfair to them, but it's unfortunate at times. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of nice, good people that were affected very negatively by this guy's behavior. And it's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate.